Hello and welcome to another episode of 7th Tier Podcast, a weekly storybook brawl podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best one-handed brawl player I know. It's Sythesys. Sith, how's your hand?
Yeah, it's okay. I did finally see a doctor about it. It's a fracture. I'll be in a sling for
Ouch.
6 to 8 weeks, but it's fine. It's not causing me too much pain, and I can certainly record a podcast.
What a week for them to have released the hotkeys for the game when you're playing one-handed.
That actually isn't too bad. I just bound them to my mouse keys, so that does actually work just fine.
Nice. I keep forgetting that they're there and haven't remembered to use them yet.
It's definitely worth practicing, especially like those Holy Grail turns are much better when you can not have to move the mouse to the roll button. Yeah.
Oh man, I've done Hatball so many times this week as well. Oh man, I came second in that game. I'm just staring into the void now. But that's spoilers for what's coming up. Today we're going to be reviewing some of the patch notes. But first, as we do every week, we've got our stats from the... Oh my god, I just saw sets. We've got our stats from the since the update last week. I guess I'll go first. This week, since the update, I have managed 17 games with 5 crowns and 11 top 4s for an average finish of 3.72. Almost all of that was on the day of the update.
Sure.
I mean, almost all of the bad numbers were on the day of the update. Since the update, I've managed, since that day, since the 4th, I've managed 2.5 as an average, which I'm very pleased with. But on the 3rd, I could not win to save my life.
Yeah, I mean, new patch, new stuff to learn. You got to figure out what's strong, and it definitely this was definitely well, dwarves is gone, and now what do? I definitely get that vibe. I, on the other hand, thrive in new environments. I have an average placement this week of 2.33. It's my second best ever, with 13 top 4s. 6 crowns from just 15 games played. Yeah, not played a huge amount, just the nature of my time this week with my injury and so on. But I have been really enjoying this patch. I'm very excited to play again. I didn't hugely enjoy the previous meta. I found the dwarves a little one note. Like, dwarves really wants you to play an all dwarves comp, at least. With a lot of the other things, you can play different supports or different, combinations of units, whereas dwarves is very, how many Tweedles and Lordies did you get? That's how good you did. And it's pretty uninteresting. I've liked this patch a lot. I think there's a lot to explore, and I've always thrived in fresh environments. I think and my stats reflect that, I think.
I've got some follow-up from last week's argument. I don't want to rehash the whole discussion that we had last week. If you want to check out the episode 17, Shop, Lock and Roll. But we did have some feedback from Sydney on Twitter, host of Book of Heroes podcast. If you want to, after you finish downloading our entire back catalogue, go and check them out. They're the other major Storybook Brawl podcast. They lack the virtue of sumptuous British accents, but otherwise they're very good. And he pointed out that the main thing we missed with Magic Research, and I think a huge part of why I see Magic Research as a miss on that all-important turn 2, is because of the chances that you get a tie after you cast it. I think that's the most likely situation. Almost everyone's got a +1/+1 of stats from that turn, or some stats from their hero power. Unless you're someone like Merlin, you're not super likely to win that fight and keep those stats, at which point you've just wasted the gold, essentially. Maybe it gained you the health if it made the difference between tying and not, but that's also pretty unlikely.
Yeah, I think I'm sure I've had that thought about Magic. I definitely have had that thought about Magic Research in the past, but I didn't bring it up in discussion, and it does really drag that. It's 50-50 to win it. Well, no, that's definitely not true. It's way worse than that, for sure. And that definitely does explain why Magic Research is one of the worst spells you can hit on that turn. You still always cast it. Like, it's still infinitely better than, like, rolling, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not very often a permanent buff. Though, again, some units benefit significantly more from those stats than others. Giving +1 to a unicorn is the kind of stat bump that will make you significantly more likely to win than lose.
Yes.
So it can be a question of where that Magic Research is ending up. But yeah, it's you're right that it's significantly worse than 50.
So this leaves us with, there's 10 spells that we have access to on the second turn of the game. And to remind listeners, I'm in favour of locking Sugar and Spice and possibly Witch's Brew on the first turn of the game to make sure that we've got a decent permanent +1/+1 buff to use all of our gold on that second turn. And Matt prefers to get the random shop start of turn 2 to try and high roll it. So there's 10 spells. There's 3 misses, right? You can find Free Roll, For Glory, or Magic Research, all of which are sort of nothing. Free Roll is definitely the worst, but For Glory and Magic Research are so unlikely to get there. For Glory especially, because you don't even have the +1/+1, that I consider them a miss. And then you've got 3 hits, right? Forbidden Fruit, which gives you the extra unit, which is huge. Shrink Spell gives you that extra unit with a turn's delay, which is huge. And Genie's Wish, because Genie's Wish is a reroll at any of the others, and also if it hits Eeny, Meeny, or Shrink Spell, that is huge.
And the ability to, for example, take a Wizard's Familiar, and then the Genie's Wish is often enough stats that's good anyway, right? Like, Genie's Wish has a ton of upside.
The two procs of Cinderella, 2 Merlin triggers from time to time. Genie's Wish can be really good. It was better when Merlin was better. So we've got these 3 hits and these 3 major misses, and then there's 4 somewhat in the middle cards, right? Sugar and Spice, Eeny, Meeny, Witch's Brew, and Shard of the Ice Queen, all of which are flat worth a +1/+1. They're kind of the median result for that turn. The thing that we didn't consider last week, and the reason I busted out the hypergeometric calculator since we recorded, is that it's completely plausible to roll a shot of good unit, neutral unit, neutral unit, and the spell, Witch's Brew.
Yes.
If you haven't bought an evil unit on turn 1, which is fairly likely, you've missed on that spell. That's turned what was a medium result into a miss. And when we lock the shop, we're always locking a spell that's guaranteed to have a target. So I ran the numbers. There's 14 non-good units and 15 non-evil units on that first turn of the game.
Sure.
Which means that, and there's 10 spells, it's 1 in 10, whether you hit the worst possible one, right? So it's about 31% to see no goods, and 39% to see no evils. You add those together, it's about 7% to see Witch's Brew or Sugar and Spice, but not have a target for it. And then there's also Shard of the Ice Queen, which demands a good target, which is effectively an extra miss, right?
Yeah. Does any of that consider... I assume none of that is considering that we might have bought a good or evil unit on turn 1.
No, it's not. If you have, you can just take that away from the results. So if you have a good unit, you can take away 6% because there's 2 things that need a good unit to target, Shard and Sugar and Spice.
Sure.
So if you have a good unit, you're only 3% to see no evils at all plus Witch's Brew.
Sure. That's definitely worth considering. I think we're already 33% to hit to miss on our spell. Adding 3% to that doesn't, or even 7% to that doesn't massively swing how I feel about the shop. I don't think, worth considering, but I don't think I changed my stance. I think the high rolls are they put you so far ahead, and missing on your spell, not getting that +1/+1, is not great, but isn't I'm way, way behind in a way that the extra unit is I'm way, way ahead. I think that's the difference for me.
For more information on that difference, check out our show last week.
Indeed.
That brings us to our main topic for today. So we've had a brand new patch released, as we hinted in the introduction. A huge update to the meta, really shaking things up. It's basically sort of this month's patch, right? It's this is the meta that we're going to be looking at for the next several weeks. And so for our main show today, we're going to go through all of these notes, probably putting more emphasis on some of them than others, and discuss sort of the changes that these have made and how we're finding the ladder in light of these changes.
Yeah. We're just going to go through these in the order that they're listed.
So we're kicking things off with some changes to Dwarves. So they formally announced that Bossy has been cut. I think there's definitely a chance that Bossy returns, probably as a 4-drop. But this has been the case in the meta for a few weeks now. Didn't shut Dwarves down nearly as much as one would have hoped. So they've also cut the Dwarven Forge. This was the treasure that let you stick 2 dwarves together to an upgraded one, led to those disgusting turns as dwarves, where you would just go treasure, treasure, treasure. Suddenly your board is twice as powerful, your treasures are all upgraded, and you're dealing so much more damage to opponents. Yeah. And they finally nerfed Tweedledee. This is the change we were expecting before the previous tournament. Tweedledee was a completely disgusting 4-drop. They've now pushed it to tier 5 and given it +2/+1. It's now an 8/2 to begin with. Same text, last breath, summon Tweedledum with attack and health swapped, but now it costs 5 gold. It's a tier 5 unit.
Yeah.
How have we found dwarves in the last week?
Oh, just awful. It's probably a classic overreaction of they are much worse than they have been, so I'm steering hard away from them. But I have been steering hard away from them. Both Bossy and Tweedle were significant pulls to the archetype. Obviously, we have had a week without Bossy anyway, but Bossy was really good. And Tweedle's the big one. Tweedle was the big... It was dwarves have always had this kind of strength in the mid game, right? Especially with Dwarven Forge and so on. You were collecting units. You were collecting 2 and 3-drop and 4-drop dwarves more aggressively than most, and you were just trying to get a ton of pairs. You were only interested in dwarf units, so you naturally tripled a lot of units. You often had a lot of gold units and dealt a lot of damage and was quite strong in the mid game. Then you would have a tier 5 kind of dip in power level when it was just angry, and angry was quite bad.
Yeah.
And then you would get strong again when you found your Lordies. Tweedledee changed that by going, this is just like not only the best dwarf, but also just one of the best units on that tier. If you ever had a Sting or a Haunted Helm, he was able to triple down on the stats of that, which was just insane. Like, when Tweedledee first came out, we were like, wow, this is just like our wombats. But, like...
Yeah, the comparison that hit this home for me was when I couldn't decide whether to take a Tweedledee or a Wombat from a shop, and I was like, wait, one of these is a tier 5 unit and the other's a tier 4 unit. What's happening?
Oh, yeah. Like, Tweedledee just gets a ton of extra bonus from stats, was in a good tribe, and... yeah, was fundamentally too strong. I think at tier 5, I am significantly less interested in Tweedledee, both because things like Sporker and Lady of the Lake are less likely to stick around for a long time with my Tweedledee. It's still an okay, like Wombats, just kind of, it's 5.0, I want a unit with a bunch of stats. I have some supports, let's grab this, which is most of the time how I play Wombats, right? Like, I pick up Wombats as this unit has a good number of stats anyway. Maybe I've got, like, a fancy pants, and it gets a ton of extra benefit from that. I'm not planning for it to be in my late game comp, but it's going to be a bridge until I get there. I think Tweedledee fills that same role. If you're Dwarves, you still want as many Tweedles as you can get, I imagine, but I think Dwarves is in a pretty dire place. And I've definitely significantly moved down on basically every dwarf as a result.
I have done dwarves exactly once this patch. I came third, pupped the Magic Dragon on a dwarves build. I got a bunch of fannies in the early game.
Sure.
And one like Lady of the Lake in the mid game. It was fine, but it felt like dwarves a couple of patches ago, which I think is for the best, where I had 2 turns at tier 6, and because I didn't find a Lordy, I didn't stand a chance of making the top 2.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Like, I think dwarves is quite a linear. It's a very linear strategy.
Yes.
You want all the dwarves, and you want no other units. Like, a lot of the comps are like that, right? Pumpkin wants all of the units to be evil. Trees wants all the units to be trees. But there's a lot of flexibility in the mid game heading towards that. Whereas dwarves comp starts coming together much sooner. You know, it's fannies and doublies, which are your payoffs. Whereas like trees don't even really have a unit until tier 4. I found the dwarves was very much on rails a lot of the time, and especially once you had the Dwarven Forge, very easy to just pick every dwarf and get treasures.
I will say that without Bossy and with Tweedledee coming later, there were definitely non-dwarves in my comp for a lot longer than in previous patches. You don't need to be 100% dwarves unless you've got the Angry or multiple fannies, or eventually the Lordy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, and like you're not even looking for Dwarven Forge, so there isn't even a treasure other than like Dwarven Mine or Deepstone Mine.
Yeah.
I guess is the other reason to have all dwarves. But
you're still going to buy a bunch because you have to flip your Princess White at some point.
Yeah.
So you can end up cluttered a bit with dwarves, but if you get lucky and they combine together into a crafty that's an actual unit, then you'll be all right.
Yeah.
So that changes to dwarves. Now we've got some changes to treasures. Let's start with the big one. So they've made Sky Castle into Dwarven Forge. Sky Castle is now, you only need 2 copies to upgrade a prince or a princess.
I think there's several reasons that this is not Dwarven Forge. I think this is both a significantly weaker version of Dwarven Forge and kind of in an okay place. I think it's a reward for an archetype that desperately needed some love and doesn't do any of the really busted things that Dwarven Forge. 2 reasons for this. 1, there aren't any 5 or 6 drop princes or princesses that this affects. The only royals at tier 5 and tier 6 are Lancelot and Hercules. This effect doesn't work on them. Technically, it does if you Gloves of Thieving, steal a second Hercules. But realistically...
I was going to say, if we evil twin and have 2 Herculeses, do they stick together? I have no idea.
Yes, that does work. Don't do it. It's my recommendation. But yes.
Would we get a 6-drop treasure for doing that?
Yes, you do.
And then another when it completes its quest?
No, the quest is gone. The quest is gone.
The quest is gone. Okay.
Yes.
Because you can get a golden Hercules that still has its quest if you kiss into it or something.
This does not do that.
Okay.
Yeah, the quest is complete if you have gained a treasure from it for any reason, and doubling it does count. I've done that before. But yes, it's mostly irrelevant. The main thing this does, obviously, is make Arthur better, right? The joke is that Prince and Princesses really wanted as many triples as they could to make King Arthur or Prince Arthur playable, and this definitely enables that really hard. Like, certainly, your pair of Arthurs, which is always super awkward. Like, Arthur in particular is a unit that gets, like, more than twice as good when goldened, because it starts affecting itself, which is huge. And I think, yeah, Sky Castle enabling that Prince and Princess mid-game is going to be a significant kind of draw to the archetype. I think Miri in particular is obviously salivating at this change. I think Miri might even be in quite a good place now. But I think in general, Sky Castle not going to be anywhere near as oppressive as Dwarven Forge was. And you are sometimes going to face, someone on 4.2 who picked up a Sky Castle and suddenly has 6 golden units and you'll take 20. But I think that will happen much, much less than Dwarves, where that happened a little too often, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I mean, it happened before that when a Royals comp, when a Miri found their Sky Castle and their whole team got +4/+4, that was also devastating to play against, right?
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things to mention with this is, as with basically all 4-drop treasures, you got to mention blind mice. This now means that fewer people are going to be drawn towards dwarves when they, like, it was a very good thing to do in the last patch, was, like as Wonder Waddle, we ended up dwarves fairly often because you'd pair up mice and find a dwarven forge, and then suddenly you're all in on dwarves. I think if you pair up a mice and take I think I would already need to have some royals to want to take a Sky Castle in that situation.
I'm just looking now at our tier list for golden units
Sure.
to see which ones are really worth combining together. Now, obviously, a lot of the Prince and Princesses are those quest units where it's not worth.
But a lot of them are Romeo and Juliet. Like, Romeo and Juliet get very little benefit.
Well, Romeo gets very little benefit. I think Juliet is a lot better when they're golden.
Sure.
For one thing, they start acquiring stats from Arthur's.
Yeah,
But
that's
also, then the Romeo will summon a golden Juliet, which is both larger and deals more damage.
Yeah, that's fair.
The only times I've actually taken Sky Castle on this patch were in Slay comps, where I used it as a rebuy on a 4-drop treasure.
Yeah, sure.
I would just take Sky Castle, immediately 2 mermaids would jump together, and I'd try and find Horn or something.
Sure. Yeah, Mermaid is definitely worth mentioning with that as well. Definitely a unit that I'm way up on in this last couple of patches. So
Princess Peep is also down as getting worse, though Ogre Princess gets better. So a lot of them aren't exciting to combine, even when they're not quest unit.
no, like again, this is all about Prince Arthur, which is kind of what Royals has always been about, and I think this better emphasizes what the archetype is. And I think that's good.
Definitely. Whereas Dwarves wasn't really about finding golden dwarves.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some dwarves that care about treasures and stuff. I can see it as a flavorful connection. 2 more treasure changes. Dancing Sword and Fountain of Youth have gone from the very vanilla all your characters have +1 attack, all your characters have +1 health, to the slightly more directional, Dancing Sword is your evil characters have +1/+1, Fountain of Youth gives your good characters +1/+1. I found myself taking these more,
No.
but I'm not sure it was correct to.
Yeah, I have not found myself. Like, I think Fountain of Youth is better. I don't think Dancing Sword is better. Like, I'll admit, like, I don't take tier 2 triples very often, and this change has not helped me want to do that. Like, a lot of my mid-game comps are a slew of various good and evil units. Sometimes, you'll be an evil queen comp, or you'll be just some random, stags and good supports, and Fountain of Youth or Dancing Sword will be relevant. But 90% of the time, these are worse than Skip still. And the fact that they aren't as versatile, like they're a little stronger, a little less versatile, I think it's pretty much a wash. Like, yeah, I would say Fountain of Youth's a little better, Dancing Sword's a little worse, but who cares?
What makes you say that Fountain of Youth is a little better? Is it just Princess Peach?
Health is just not a particular +1 health is just not a particularly valuable stat.
Sure. Better than it was, not better than Dancing Sword currently is.
Yes.
Sure.
Like, the point is, yeah, +1 health was less. Units at that stage tended to benefit more from +1 attack because of things like Pete, whereas +1 health just isn't very good with summons and isn't good. Like, it doesn't make your back row supports able to trade up. That's the sort of thing that Dancing Sword enabled, and Fountain of Youth didn't help with at all.
I think Dancing Sword is probably a little better than Fountain of Youth. Obviously, you'll know which one's better for you when you're being offered them, but I think when I'm evils on tier 3, which isn't often and isn't necessarily where I want to be, I want to have a board of all evils. When I'm goods, I probably want a good witch that's supporting a tree and a sure shot, and then some other random units, whatever I've been offered that's stacked.
Sure. The other thing worth mentioning with these is I think the most common way for me to get a 2-drop treasure is by finishing a Cinderella, and Cinderella doesn't work with either of these, and that is, awkward, for sure. Yeah, I think, these are not exciting, but they weren't exciting before.
Next up, we have some character changes. Kicking things off with Oni King. Oni King's been moved down from a 6-drop to a 5-drop. Still an evil monster. It's now a 7/7, so it's slightly smaller. And it's now giving your monsters +7/+7 when they attack. So it's giving a smaller bonus as well. But it's coming down much sooner in the game. This is a good change. I didn't like Oni King as a 6-drop at all.
Agreed. Like, Oni King fundamentally almost never made it into your late game comps. Sometimes your Pumpkin comp would have an Oni King somewhere. But usually Oni King was an awkward bridging unit that you pick up on 6.0 and still plan to replace later. Now it kind of, like, on 5 fits into your Slay comp. Grim Souls, Friendly Spirits are pretty good with Oni King if you're something like Trophy Hunter or whatever.
We've got to talk about Oni King on Trophy Hunter.
Yeah, it's very strong.
On the one hand, they've diluted the 5-drop pool down a bunch, which makes it harder to find Baba Yagas. But on the other hand, there's now 2 5-drops you're looking for as Trophy Hunter. Like, the Oni King's going to pump up your spirits, it's going to pump up your Grim Souls, it's going to pump up your monster books if they attack.
Mummies as well. Like, yeah, Oni King just works with all that stuff. I think Oni King is now, like, again, still doesn't go with many late game comps. Your, like, late game Slay stuff doesn't really have room for an Oni King. But on 5, it's a good bridging point point, and given that they've diluted the 5-drop pool, it's a little hard to find barbers. It gives you more to look for, and I think that's a good place for that unit. It also is worth mentioning that it does mean that when your pumpkins pop, you are more likely to get Oni Kings now. You couldn't previously, and now you can. And actually, from a pumpkin, only like if you get a golden pumpkin which pops out a couple of Oni Kings, that could be a ton of extra stats. Like, that's actually legitimately very good.
Like, Spear of Achilles has always been good on a pumpkins comp.
Yeah. I think in general, I would say pumpkin, despite not receiving any direct nerfs or buffs, this patch has been relatively positive for them. So keep an eye out on pumpkin. It might be slightly, like, it's not nearly as good as it was on the pumpkin patch a couple of weeks ago, but a couple of extra evil 5-drops, I'm more interested in pumpkin than I was.
It was always really awkward trying to position an Oni King to try and have one after your pumpkin popped when it could be really powerful, especially if it's golden, but also you want it to die first. Like, you've got some supports. Trying to position an Oni King has always been a complete nightmare.
Yeah, for sure.
Next up, we've got some brand new units. Do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, absolutely. Gingerbread Knight is one of the most, it's probably not the most exciting, but I think does something that I think this game hasn't really had that a lot of other auto battlers have, which is a catch-up mechanic. So this is a 4-mana 7/7, which is Juliet stat. That's the most vanilla stats you're ever going to get on a 4-drop unit. But it also gets +7/+7 if you have 20 or less health. So this is the biggest payoff for like having a really rough early game, maybe greeding for XP, maybe just playing skip. It's a way to stabilize when you've had a rough start, you've fallen behind. Now you can buy a 4-cost 14/14, and that really can help fix the disaster. Like, I'm never going to intentionally take damage to power up my Gingerbread Knights. That's not how this game works. Your health is just too valuable to be doing that, realistically.
Yes.
But if you've had that disaster start, and plenty of the late game heroes do have that, even like Zelhua can have like a really rough start, and then being able to grab a couple of Gingerbread Knights and go like, yeah, no, I'm stable, I'm fine, is really, really nice. It's also a royal, which is nice for Miri, nice for Prince Arthur. You can do some cool stuff with it. Yeah, it's a good unit. Obviously, honestly, I think the main thing to take away with Gingerbread Knight is it is Juliet sized. On 4.0, it's kind of big. Even if you're at 40, it's not an embarrassing unit. Like, if you've got any synergy with it, it's fine anyway. Like, it's not crazy. I'm not windmill slamming it, but it's not. I would not look too hard at its text. A 4-mana 7/7 is fine. Like, the number of times I take Puff Puff on 4.0 to just be like a fine mid-game unit, this is almost the same size.
I was going to say it's also Puff Puff sized, but I guess if you are taking Puff Puffs as balls of stats.
I do. On 4.0, I do that.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I'm not there at all right now. I don't know, maybe I'm playing badly, but my stats would certainly imply I'm playing badly, but I'm definitely spending tier 4 rolling for high upside tier 4 units.
It's all context. Like, I wouldn't say I always take a Puff on 4.0, but I'm often fine with it.
Gingerbread Knight's been really hard for me to evaluate because I've taken it a lot in the games where I was losing, and I went on to lose those games.
That's fair.
But it's hard to blame the Gingerbread Knight for that.
Yeah, for sure. And like, it is worth mentioning, like, it is a vanilla unit that doesn't synergize with stuff. It's very much a stopgap to stabilize you, not a unit that you want to marry yourself to. Don't like move into royals because you bought a Gingerbread Knight on 4.0 to survive. Like, buy it and find strength elsewhere.
Speaking of finding strength elsewhere, we have a new tier 5 unit. It's a new evil treant. It's called Burning Tree. Starts as a 5/20, and it says bonuses to my attack also add to my health. Now I'm going to read that text box one more time because I've gotten it wrong more than once. Bonuses to this unit's attack will also benefit its health.
Yeah.
Means if you Burning Palm it, you're giving it +4/+4. But if you Flourish it, you're giving it +0/+7, like anything else.
Indeed. A few things to say about this. One, it's the only tree without a face. I do love the art on Burning Tree, but it is just a tree and not a living tree, unlike the rest of them, which is pretty spooky. Next is, I think this is the strongest unit in the game, or thereabouts. I think Burning Tree is in a really...
I would agree with that.
Is a really, really strong unit. It's both pretty good to just buy as a ball of stats as a 5-drop. Like, a 5/20 is already okay. It's not quite as... It's about as big as a 10/10, realistically, at that stage of the game. And any buffs at all, it starts getting crazy. It's both the biggest, like, it's an incredible late game threat. Once you get some Ashwood Elms, it can... I've seen 200 Burning Trees plenty of times. It enables your Echo Wood to work in your trees comp.
Actually has a way of giving Echo Wood that toughness boost, which is
Indeed.
needed ever since Shoulder Fairies didn't work.
It's great with things like Sting, like plus 100 attack sword. It's almost as good as Tweedledee.
Gross.
With plus 100 attack sword, like, it's really strong. I think Burning Tree is this is the biggest meta shift for me, is that in the early game previously I was looking quite aggressively for dwarves. I think now I'm looking quite aggressively for trees.
When I said I was rolling for those high upside 4-drops, it's all about those Heartwood Elders.
Yes, like I'm looking for Darkwood Creepers on tier 3 more than I was. I'm looking for Ring of Meteors to go with it.
Darkwood Creeper's so good with Burning Tree.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's gross.
It's insane. Like, your Ring of Meteors gives your Burning Tree +2/+1. Like, what? Okay. No, wait, yeah, +2. More if Ferris things are golden.
Yeah, Burning Tree is also a great unit to gold, because then you double the bonus when it moves to the toughness, which is exactly what you want on those bonuses.
Yeah, like, trees has always struggled as a comp, as the comp that could get everything to be a 250, right? You could have tons and tons of attack, but actually buffing the toughness on your units was always a struggle. Burning Tree completely solves that problem, and is just extremely strong. I think Burning Tree is...
It's so disgusting to have a high toughness tree in the front line, because it means that your Robin Woods can get more than one attack from the back line. And they already have 100 power.
Yeah, for sure. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Burning Tree gives you some form of nerf going forward. It doesn't necessarily need that. Like, right now, I'm not screaming for a Burning Tree nerf. I think there's plenty going on in this meta. It's not all trees all the time. I do think it's the strongest thing to do. And several games where I've been ahead on XP or whatever, the thing that I'm looking to do is Burning Tree. In a way that I used to look for Copycat Good Boy. Like, I'm ahead in XP, I don't have a comp. What's the strongest thing I can assemble? Oh, it's Copycat Good Boy. Now it's Burning Tree Ashwood Elm. That's my 2-card late game winning combo. And
I've got to mention, Ashwood Elm is the game winning combo, but I've collected Burning Trees and never found the Elm and been alright. Like, my game last night was 2 Burning Trees, Golden Heartwoods, Evil Eye, Horn of Olympus. So that I was just getting unreal scaling on some Burning Trees and some Soul Tax in the front line.
Yeah.
And I was doom rolling for the Ashwoods and didn't find them, but it still worked out.
The other thing I want to mention with, like, Burning Tree is it's an evil 5-drop that's just kind of good stats. I've played it in my Pumpkin comps and it was totally decent. Like, Burning Tree in front of a Grumble Gore is a good unit, and I'm happy to have it.
Like, we think of the standard stats of a 6-drop as the vanilla stats of a 6-drop as being a 2020, right? Burning Tree is quite quickly a 2030.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it doesn't take much. I think if Burning Tree does get changed, I would expect it to just have slightly fewer starting stats. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is it's one of the strongest scaling units, but also just starts as a unit I'm happy to pick up, which is probably a little much. Like, when... It would be like if Echo would also happen to be a 15-15. It's like,
yes.
What? Why? That's very strange. I think Burning Tree is just a little too big. If it had like 0 attack to start with, I think that would both emphasize, that would fit the stat lines of most trees, and emphasize that you need to buff its attack. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a little smaller in some future patches.
Final thing I wanted to say about Burning Tree was to highlight my stats quickly. So I mentioned at the start that I was doing really badly start of this patch. And since then, I stopped doing really badly. And every time I record a result, I record a brief description of what my comp was. And so I wanted to read off my descriptions from the last 14 games, roughly since I started winning. They are trees, 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 Pan's Shadow, which means I dreamed into Pan's Shadow, Dwarves No Lordies, trees, 2 Baba Yagas, that's a trophy hunter game, trees, Hatball, Hatball Fork, Ball, Bad Moon Nothing, that was a 7th place as Wonder Waddle, trees, Oni King. That's all I've been doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say my stats are quite that trees-like, but yeah, no, trees is in a really good place. And again, I think the description of like Copycat Good Boy is how I feel about it. It's the best late game comp. You need to have it in mind. It's a pivot. Like, I'm willing to take speculative Burning Trees because, in the same way that I used to take speculative Copycats, right? Copycat wasn't a particularly good unit on tier 4 because it led to the best late game comp. I was willing to speculate on it. I feel the same about Burning Tree. And it also means between Burning Tree and Oni King at tier 5, and the fact that tier 5 units went from 11 to 15 units on tier 5. Like, tier 5 it often had this weird bridging point, right? Where it's like, well, we're only going to be here for a little bit of time, and tier 6 units are way better than tier 5 units, so I don't know what I'm really meant to do here. I don't think that's true at all in this patch. There's tons I'm looking for on tier 5, and I want to be rolling and finding it.
Yeah. Also massively waters down the Ans in this patch. True. It's a shame. And next up, in terms of watering down the pool of 5-drops, we have a very unique unit. This is Time Flies. This is a 5 gold, 3/3 neutral animal, and when one of your characters dies, you summon Time Flies from your hand. I haven't played with this one yet, have you?
Yeah, I've had it in a few different comps. I think fundamentally, one thing to definitely highlight is that as a way to add just like an extra +3/+3 to your board, Time Flies is disastrously bad. Like 5 gold for a worm root is nothing.
Oh god.
And honestly, it can ruin your attack order. Like, I've definitely had opponents who've just been like, had a random Time Flies in their hand, and I've been like, oh cool, great, their slot 2 unit didn't attack. Instead, this useless 3/3 attack. It was almost like it's kind of like the effect you get from Fog, right? Not only have you nerfed their biggest unit, you've got a unit that wastes their time attacking and doing nothing. And a vanilla Time Flies fills exactly that role. So I would say stay away from vanilla Time Flies. I have had a few places where I've had it be quite good, though these might be quite niche. The first was with Corrupted Heartwood in an Avella comp. It is an animal, and with Corrupted Heartwood, it was evil, so it both came down as like a 10/3, and then gave the rest of my units extra attack. And then, you know, I think I had a pumpkin or something. It's a 5-drop evil unit for a pumpkin at that point.
Nice.
Like, it did some stuff.
I've got to ask, Sith, I've got to ask, how on earth did you end up with Corrupted Heartwood?
I was playing Avella. I think Avella is one of the few characters on which that is actually a valid option, right? Like, I agree Corrupted Heartwood is complete trash, and I don't take it on basically anyone else. But I do think on Avella in particular, having Baby Bear be a unit that you can play in your comp is pretty big. But yes, normally stay away from it. But you can also do the opposite with Crown of Atlas. You can have it be like Time Flies, Crown of Atlas, Godmother is a thing, I guess. You know, maybe. It's good with Good Boy if you've got Crown of Atlas as well. Like, the Good Boy dies, Time Flies comes in, gets the Good Boy buff.
Sure, having 7 units benefiting from a Good Boy buff is useful.
It's not, again, I think Time Flies is a niche unit, but there are a few different ways you can make synergies with it. The other thing that I've done, though again, I can't imagine this will come up very often, is I tripled a unit with Embiggening Stone, so it had +45/+45, and then I kissed it into a Time Flies, and a 60/60 Time Flies was really good. Which kind of goes without saying, but it was genuinely...
Other than Nyan, I guess, were there any 5-drop units that would have been bad with +45/+45?
No, but it meant that I had, like, in Beginning Stone, you can get as many +45/+45 units you want, realistically. It's not very hard. And so what it meant is that I got to run 8 of them rather than 7 of them, and that genuinely was a significant boost to the power of my board. Like, a 60/60 Time Flies was pretty good. I've also seen, though I don't know how actually good it was, this in combination with something, with the next unit we're about to talk to, Feasting Dragon. If you can just get, fundamentally, a 3/3 is very small. If it's like a 20/20, it's a unit that is adding a ton of extra stats.
Can we just run a Time Flies if it's going to be coming in with some support bonuses? Is that enough to justify it?
The issue is that you don't have enough control over which slot dies first. Like, if it's summoning in slot 1, like, it's good with 100 attack sword, if you're attack first, but...
And don't have something else that's better with 100 attack sword. It's not as good as Tweedledee with 100 attack sword.
Yes, this is the other problem, is that, and like, it is an animal as well. It should be good in a summons comp, but the way that summons interact with this is that there needs to be space. Like, if I have Baby Bear in slot 1 making use of 100 attack sword, after the third bear dies and none of my animals dies, it comes, like, what? How did it get there? You know, you can use it as a way to, like, I've seen people try to use it to pump their vultures or pump their hippocamps because it's an animal.
Sure.
I've been relatively unimpressed with the expense of that relative to the bonuses you're getting. Like, even when it's triggering a golden vulture and a hippocamp, the total number of stats you're getting there is still not great.
It'll come in and be doubled by a bear steam, which if it's a 60/60 is great.
Agreed. I certainly did think about trying to do that when I had my big Time Flies.
It works with Geppetto as well, right?
Yeah, Geppetto should definitely be picking up Time Flies. That's pretty good there. But yeah, it's a cool, niche, synergistic unit that isn't good on its own. I think that's a good place. I wouldn't be shocked if this ends up coming like down a tier or something at some point. It's just a little expensive and a little weak initially for what I'm doing, and it's never the busted thing. Like, I'm never, like, even when it was a 60/60, as you said, any other tier 5 unit would also have been really good. Like, any unit that's got +20/+20 in the shop is a good unit. I'm not sure Time Flies is really doing the work there.
Cool. It's good that to have a unit that's good in animals comps. Generally speaking, from the last patch, I don't think this is enough to push them up the tier list very much. But I'm interested in Time Flies. Haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah.
Next up, we mentioned there is the Feasting Dragon. This is the 4th dragon in the game. It's a 5-drop neutral dragon, 12 power, 8 toughness, and it has a slay trigger. For the rest of the game, characters in your shop have +1/+1. This is a gingerbread party every time it slays. Have you played much with the Feasting Dragon?
Yeah, I have a little bit. Again, neither of us played a huge number of games this week, but I've played a couple with Feasting Dragon. I don't think the unit's very good.
No, I don't think it's good.
A 12-8 is okay stats. Tier 5, it's nothing special. 10-10 is about what you'd expect from a tier 5 unit, and this is slightly more attack weighted.
Yeah, it's relatively likely to slay, though there'll definitely be boards against which it's 0% to slay.
Especially with trees being so popular, it's not the best time for Feasting Dragon. It is also a dragon for your Dragon's Nest, so that's good. Though it doesn't have flying because it's too fat. So keep those things in mind. But for the most part, like, the times I've seen Feasting Dragon be effective are when you get it early or you get it with a Baba Yaga very quickly. Like, you were kind of... The issue is that I don't think it's worth having this be the slay unit you go in on compared to something like a Lance, because even if it gets 6, 8, 10 triggers, well, great, and now I'll replace it with better units.
Yeah.
Like, you put a bunch of effort in, and then, like, characters in the shop having plus, like, as within Beginning Stone, right? Like, even when you get to the point where you've made your own in Beginning Stone, it's not until you triple the units that those stats really actually add up. And it's just... there's too many hoops there. Like,
yeah, and a Beginning Stone starts off at 15 Feasting Dragon triggers. Like,
indeed. The other thing worth mentioning is that it's currently bugged. Golden unit still only gives your character in your shot +1/+1, so it's not even good to triple.
I didn't even know that. Man, I was looking for that triple for so long. I want to talk about my Feasting Dragon game quickly.
Sure.
This was a game as Wonder Waddle. I tripled some animal familiars, I think, on like turn 2 of the game, something like that. There must have been a forbidden fruit or something. I was offered the choice between Jumping Beans and Dragon's Nest, and I took the Dragon's Nest. There was a baby dragon in the shop. I was like, this will be fun. I can go in on Feasting Dragon later potentially, Lightning Dragons in the mid game potentially. I felt good about my prospects of taking that Dragon's Nest. So I took it. I ended up assembling Hat Ball. So I was doing Hat Ball-y things. Saw the Feasting Dragons. I was like, this is my opportunity. I had 2. So my board was like 3 good wizardy units over on the right-hand side, and then 2 Feasting Dragons supported by a Baba Yaga over on the left-hand side. I got 10 to 12 like Feasting Dragon triggers. Everything in the shop was enormous, and it was terrible because I didn't want to buy any more units.
Yeah.
Gingerbread Party is not a spell I want to cast on tier 5. Doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You're not going to buy more than like 2 or 3 6-drop units. You need units that are scaling with the game, not the ability to invest a lot of gold in units that have scaled a little bit.
Yeah, that is exactly the problem. It's, yes, shockingly awkward. Yeah, I think it's okay. Like, I wouldn't expect it to see too many changes necessarily. I think it will just be a fine 5-drop that you'll sometimes pick up on 5.0 to get a few extra stats, and then forget about it.
I think it's one of those 5-drops, like Aeon has been previously as well. It's one of those 5-drops that's really exciting ahead of time.
Yeah,
if you
agreed.
poly or kiss into it, it can be incredible. That can be a game-winning unit.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that's the role it plays, and I think that's a fine place for it. And yeah, it's cool to have another dragon for Dragon's Nest, I guess.
That brings us to the end of units. Now onto heroes. There's no new heroes, but realistically there's 2 new heroes because they have changed Pan's Shadow and Fates significantly. We'll start with Pan's Shadow. Pan's Shadow used to care about buying evil units. Now it says when you reach tier 4, level 2 and 3 characters no longer appear in your shop. It's an automatic Staff of the Old Toad. It's the inverse of Pan, who never grows up. I love it.
Yeah.
What do we make of the new Pan's Shadow?
I think it is a worse version of Zelhua, but Zelhua might be the best character in the game, so that's fine. I think is roughly where I come down on it. Yeah, I came in quite low on Pan's Shadow. I was concerned with the classic Zelhua problem of this hero power doesn't do anything at all until tier 4, and even then, it can be a downside. I really, really like 3-drop treasures, and I like being able to triple my 3-drops. That doesn't happen naturally when you only get 3.0, 3.1, 3.2 to find those units. It's rough. Usually you'll triple those on 4.0, 4.1. And
you've got no hero power, so you're not getting extra econ in that time, or the ability to protect a pig in that time. It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pretty... It's a rough, let's put it that way. But it's a powerful tier 5 treasure that you get access to, and... you know what? I'm not uninterested. Yeah, I think I've seen it be good a lot. Like, I think it has a ton of potential if you can get out of that early game and find the units you're looking for. You are roughly twice as likely to find the 6-drop you're looking for. That's always been the true with Staff. It roughly halves the size of the pool, and halving the size of the pool is really good.
I think it's important to know in the current meta that a lot of the top comps are about synergies before tier 4 plus unit, right? You want to be combining your dragon with your mermaid, with your Baba Yaga. You want to be combining your Heartwood Elder with your Burning Tree, with your Ashwood Elm, right?
Yeah.
Other than other than mages, I don't think there's many comps that are holding on to their tier 2 and tier 3 units.
No.
Maybe dwarves with like doublies, but they're not top tier at the moment either. Being able to move in on those synergies, and both of those I just mentioned are scaling synergies as well. Being able to move in on those as soon as possible, and with more likelihood that you get the other halves, I think can be huge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we'll have to see how it plays out. I expect in tournaments, that's always been the thing with tournaments is late game heroes are slightly worse. I think this is a classic example of you actually have no hero power, and then you're not. Again, Zelhua can get away with having no power because 4.0 you get to buy 3 4-drops and then stabilize really quickly from there. Pan Shadow doesn't get that. You're guaranteed to have you get to pick 2 of the 5 you're offered, which is nice.
Yeah.
But that's not an economic advantage by any means. Most people buy 2 4-drops on 4.0. You're not even ahead at that point. So yeah, it's a bit dire.
It doesn't turn the corner nearly as fast as Zelhua. It would be interesting if they gave this character 5 extra health, like they did with Zelhua.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is it's definitely a worse Zelhua, so the 5 health would not be remiss, especially as a hero that has no early game. I think that would be a fine change. But I don't mind, like, if you're going to massively change a hero, start them at the base and then adjust accordingly is a better place. For the same reason I wouldn't affect our next hero.
Yeah, speaking of heroes that could have been given 5 health, we have the Fates. The Fates, instead of just flat upgraded characters get +5/+5, it's now upgraded characters have +3/+3. But the first character you buy is destined to upgrade. What this means is when you buy your first 2-drop at the very start of the game, every shop you see from then on has a bonus fated space in it that contains another copy of that 2-drop.
Until you triple it.
Until it's tripled, yes. I haven't played with the Fates yet. It's possible I've been offered them, and because I'm so used to just being blind to them in the Hero Select screen, I didn't pick them. I couldn't say for certain whether I've been offered the Fates. I know I haven't played them yet. How all in do you want to be on your first shop?
So obviously, I have always come out as a Fates hater. I thought the old version of Fates was one of probably the worst hero in the game, and certainly the most overpicked hero in the game. I think people were playing Fates, and I thought they were insane for doing so. I think Fates was incredibly weak. I never understood what was going on there.
Well, it was free.
I think the change to Dwarven Forge has hurt Fates. For example. And I think this version of the Fates is better, but not much better. What this does is a few things. It really concentrates a lot of your RNG for the entire game onto your first shot. If your first shot contains a mouse, it's insane. Like, it's way better than you think. Because you can lock the shop. So if you get a mouse, you buy the first 2 mice, you're offered a 3rd mouse in the shop because of the way Fates works. You lock that mouse, you don't buy it, you buy 2 other things. Next time there are 2 mice in the shop, you lock again. The next time there will be 3 mice in the shop, and you can get a lot of mice. You're seeing fewer shops, but the ability to get multiple tier 4 treasures is actually bonkers.
Damn.
And you can do some stuff there. You're sacrificing a lot, don't get me wrong, but you can do a lot there. But
well, I mean, those 2 4-drop treasures, you're going to get them on what, 3.0, 3.1? They're going to do a lot of catch-up for you.
For sure. And both the mice will have +3/+3. But that's reliant on the first shop having a mouse. If your first unit is a Cinderella, it doesn't count as the fated unit, so you can get a reroll by buying Cinderella on turn 1. But
that's nice.
If you're offered a shop of like Minotaur, Unicorn, Kitty Cat Purse, you're going to have a terrible game. Certainly that is what happened when I played my Fates game. I was offered, I can't remember exactly if it was exactly that, but it was something like that. I ended up taking Kitty Cat Purse thinking a 5/5 golden Kitty Cat Purse on turn 3 might get me way ahead. It didn't, because Kitty Cat Purse has never slain in my life, and it was quite weak. And then after that, the +3/+3 rather than +5/+5 means you're a much worse kind of late to mid-game hero. Like, again, as with Galahad, when they reduced that, the stats that you're getting from upgrading, suddenly going out of my way, completely shifting my game plan to get as many triples as I can, which is what Fates kind of tells you to do. +2/+3 is not enough to warp my game plan. I can't, like previously Fates would happily triple random 2-drops, because with +5/+5, any 2-drop is pretty, like Sure Shot is insanely better with +5/+5. It more than doubles its stats. With +3/+3, it's good, but it's no longer basically a tier 4 unit that you got early. It's just kind of fine. Yeah, I think other than getting a very, like, Humpty Dumpty is the other one worth mentioning, right? If your first shop contains Humpty Dumpty, you get a guaranteed Easter egg, but you often have to, like, not run the Humpties if you're scared or whatever. Like, it's complicated and weird.
Yeah, it can depend who you're paired against.
But yeah, if you can get, I mean, if one of your Humpties cracks, you will still be offered them, but that still sounds like a disaster. Yeah, I think
that sounds like you're on a treadmill to nowhere at that point. We're just buying Humpties and watching them die.
Yeah, I am not convinced by this Fates change. 5 health might help them. They do have some interesting play to them. You mentioned there's a golden chicken line of you can just have a golden chicken every single turn of the game to grow hippocamps or to just have better econ. You effectively have, so you potentially have some effectively a piggy bank, right? You can bank as much gold as you want, which is interesting, but not inherently powerful.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think Fates is in a strange place. I wouldn't be surprised if like that mouse line is not something I've heard about but haven't actually done myself or seen. Maybe that's actually good enough that Fates has some real game to it. But I'm skeptical. I think this hero is now what used to be a cross my fingers and hope I get a bunch of early triples. Like, that sometimes happen, right? Sometimes you just got destroyed by a Fates who had found two triples on 3.0 and you were just dead. They had a Cinderella and another triple and you had no chance. This concentrates a lot of that RNG to are your first 3 units the ones that are good with Fates, and if not, you're in trouble.
Yeah, so I want to do a quick hypergeometric calculation here. So what are our success units with the Fates? We've got Blind Mouse, I think it's a success. Humpty Dumpty is a success. I'm going to call Golden Chicken a success, even though we haven't tried it yet. I'm going to call Pollywoggle a success. I think 5 Golden Poly on 3.0 is legit.
God, that sounds... Am I buying Poly into Poly? Is that what's happening? Like...
I don't know what's happening, but I think guaranteeing a Golden Poly is... I mean, and if you take the Poly and run it turn 1, and it slays... You're still going to be offered polys until they're gold.
Yeah, maybe that's... You just ignore the rest of the polys forever until, like, 4.1, when you start to pick up that golden poly for later, I guess.
That could be the line. I think it's a 2-drop that has somewhere to go. I think there's interest to Pollywoggle.
Sure.
I was going to put... How many was this? This was Mouse, Chicken, Pollywoggle, Humpty Dumpty. I was going to go for Happy Little Tree.
Yeah, I like Treants on this patch, and with giving it +3/+3 means it actually has enough power, yes.
Do we like Wizard's Familiar or Crafty enough to call them a win, or Sure Shot?
I would take all of those as the Fates, I guess. But I'm not, like, that's not enough for me to be excited to play the hero.
I'm going to call them each a third of a win and go with we've got 6 options. Cinderella's a rebuy, so it's only a sample size of 19, with 6 successes in the population. We're looking for 1 success in 3 cards. Okay, we have 70% to get one of those 6.
Sure, and of course, that's not at all... The third is such bad maths. But
fine, yeah. I'll ignore the third and say that we're 62.4% to get one of the 5 that we really want. So you're 40% to miss, and if we count in those 5, you're 17% to miss on one of the 8, but 3 of those 8 are kind of bad.
Yeah, and I'm concerned that some of the 5 aren't that good. I'm worried about the poly plays, and I'm worried about the chicken actually being good enough. Like, I just have a lot of concerns that this isn't actually a powerful thing to do, as well as concentrating that RNG quite hard. And yeah, we'll keep an eye on Fates.
It's extremely novel and interesting. I'm excited that this is in the game. Like,
agreed.
This reminds me almost of Celestial Tiger in how fun it can be to run weird, like, Pollywoggle, mouse, and chicken lines.
Yeah. I also want to highlight, like, having an extra unit at the shop is really good with that turn 2 shrink rate. If you get turn 2 shrink rate, it affects an extra unit, and that is basically econ. Yep. And even, like, any of those turns of shrink rate. Turn 1 shrink rate, it doesn't actually do anything. But turn 3 shrink rate certainly does. And yeah, you can do some stuff with it. Yeah, keep an eye on Fates. I'm scared.
How impossible is it to not buy a unit on turn 1?
I think that is death. I think that is basically instant death.
I agree, I think it is instant death, but I'm worried people might try and do it, and so I needed to warn them. Final hero change is to Ivella. I don't know why they would change the best hero in the game, but they have. That is a joke. But Ivella was fine at one point. I think she was fine on Pumpkin Patch, to be fair. Ivella, now your evil characters all have +1 attack to begin with. But they also get an additional +1 attack for each of your animals that has died. Doubling down on the evil synergies, really wanting those cats and those wolves in sheep's clothing and those cats' calls. You've played Ivella. How did you find it?
Yeah, I mean, I came first in that Ivella game, but I also had Corrupted Heartwood, Ancient Sarcophagus pretty early, which is like the nuts of Ivella. I didn't have Dark Contract, I guess, but yeah. The main thing this does is give her a much better tier 2. One of the best units for Ivella is Kitty Cutpurse, but buying Kitty Cutpurse is terrifying because the unit is terrible. Now, as a 2/1, it is way, way more likely to slay, as well as being synergistic into kind of doing everything you wanted to do. You can actually put it in your back row behind, like, even just a unicorn or something, and reliably have that unicorn die before the Kitty Cutpurse attacks, and then then it's a 3/1, and a 3/1 slays pretty often. Yeah, I think this is a good change that really helps Ivella get going in a way that she sometimes struggles with. Like, her mid game has always been fine. Like, the Queen of Hearts, Vulture, kind of evil animal stuff is quite strong.
Yeah.
So like Queen of Hearts has always been good, and this is a ton of extra attack on units that benefit quite a lot from attack. But yeah, better on ramp. I think she needs a little bit of power boost. I think this is a little bit of a power boost. She doesn't feel oppressive by any means. I'm happy with this change. Yeah, I don't think she's A tier or anything, but
Yeah.
in an appropriate power boost that puts her back in the mix.
I think this is a good balance change for balancing out the meta. Finally, do you have a favourite new piece of art from this update?
I think my favorite piece of of the changes, not really, but I think the burning tree art is beautiful, and do really like it, even if it is a faceless tree. Otherwise, the changes. Shepherd's sling to me is less obviously a sling because it's next to a hammer and like some shears, and I wouldn't put a sling next to those goods. But that's okay.
For me, it's more obviously a sling. The last sling, I've since looked at the art and been like, oh yeah, it is a sling. I thought it was a stick.
Sure.
I assumed it was placeholder art of a stick.
Wand of Weirding, also not obviously a wand. It's on a table, kind of glowing. I don't know, it's fine. Shoulder fairies, not on a shoulder. It's all of the art is nice. I don't know why I'm really complaining.
I like the shoulder fairies art. I was going to quickly take a moment to trash talk that Panda didn't make the hats tier list. Potion Master. He's just put a trash can lid on his head. It's not a hat.
The previous shoulder fairies also weren't on her shoulder, so this is fine. they were wearing crowns and weren't royal. So the less confusing non-royals we can get, the better.
They're still not both a good and evil unit, which is just a travesty.
Honestly, I think shoulder fairies, now that they're tier 5, is strong enough that I don't want that change anymore.
And now that they don't go with Echo Wood, I'm back to wanting
They
it.
do go with burning. No, I guess they don't.
What do they
They're
do with
okay
burning
with
trees?
in trees with.
Yeah. Now that trees are good, I think picking up shoulder fairies is a legitimate place to be again. I mean, they've always been pretty fine. They were fine in Slay.
Sure. Yeah, they're okay. They're good. Don't change shoulder fairies.
Yeah. And they fixed the bug of King Midas that we've talked about before, where you can't get treasure map.
Yes, that was a really big one. I also want to highlight how good. It's really important that they have a tutorial for new players. A lot of the attack people had complaints about the attack animations and the screen shake and stuff. They've since fixed that very quickly. Great of them to listen to the feedback. The screen shake in particular was pretty disconcerting. You can turn it off though, so that's good. The treasure replace UI is way unbelievable amount better, and roll and lock key bindings are also huge. I think this makes Holy Grail a lot better, and it makes Hatball way more tolerable to be able to keep your mouse in a place where you can quickly take units or spells and be able to roll the shop. It was a lot of back and forth, especially on a Holy Grail turn where you have to go as fast as humanly possible. These key bindings, Unity is not that hard to add key bindings to. And hopefully they will, as I say, add custom bindings so I can change the hotkeys at some point. One thing to mention as well is there was kind of a hidden Shrivel nerf. Shrivel now occurs when damage occurs, so at the same time as Lightning Bolt and Fireball and stuff. This means it doesn't stop things like it doesn't apply before the Ashwood Elm trigger, or before Echowood gets a ton of stats at the start of fights. Shoulder Fairies obviously no longer triggers like that, but yeah, Shrivel was often used to get units before, or before a Lordy buff. That was another time that Shrivel happened and no longer will. Shrivel definitely worse. I think this is a disappointing, it was not a Shrivel being a weird timing quirk that didn't fit with the rest of the game was pretty bad for user experience and understanding how the game worked, but I liked that it was a niche that was good against comps that it was sometimes better than Smite, right? That's the joke, is that Shrivel was sometimes meaningfully better than Smite, and that was an interesting decision, and it was sometimes, again, certainly when Echowood Shoulder Fairies was the big thing, the fact that Shrivel was a counter potentially was quite nice.
I would have preferred to see this changed for clarity rather than changed out of the game. I just would have called the spell Sudden Shrivel and made its text at the very start of the brawl or whatever, to try and put it sort of ahead of the others in terms of sequencing. But clearly that wasn't their intention. It was just in error that it was happening before these other things. So I'm glad that they've tidied it up, basically.
Yeah, agreed.
Final thing today is we've got to announce our competition winners. Huge thank you to everyone who's checked out our YouTube page. I have drawn 5 random numbers from out of my spreadsheet. And I'm going to count down the comments. So comment number 13. Congratulations to Charlie Newman, to The Milky Way, to Robert Norton, to Megan Sober, and Daniel Goering. I will get in touch with you guys to hand out your codes, probably before you listen to this, but huge congratulations to those names anyway.
And thank you everyone for all the comments. Honestly, they were really, really nice. It's kind of been great to get some of that, and it's really helped, it does boost up visibility, YouTube algorithms, etc. But, we really appreciate any support, and yeah, we have plenty more codes to give away, so keep an eye out for more giveaways and similar in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for for leaving those lovely comments.
Agreed. Thank you to everyone. Yes, if you want to get in touch, please do so. You can reach out to the show in all the normal ways. Thank you so much for listening. We are available anywhere podcasts are found: iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and now YouTube. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro, he's Sythesys. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at 7th Tier Podcast, the number 7, the word podcast. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, buying kitty cat purse is terrifying because the unit is terrible. Have a great week.